Well, another week down. We are now looking at September 22nd. We got one more full week of September ahead of us. It's crazy. It's been summer-like. I won't beat a dead horse. You've seen it. You feel it. We're sweating. Air conditioners are still on in the houses. We're still in sun shirts. Although it is feeling a lot nicer today. We only got into the 70s. Cooler outside. It felt good. The last couple mornings we've started in sweatpants, sweatshirts. Friday morning we were on Waconia for the All-Terrain Protein Cup, the ATT Protein Cup. Congratulations again to Tony Lero, Don Wilson. 13.24 for 3 bass. We did a 3 bass fun derby with all the all-terrain pros that could make it. We had Frank Ramsey in town from Illinois. We had Chad Smith. We had Chad Grigsby. We had a pile of people. It was pretty fun to see some of the guys and gals I don't get to see as much. So came out there, we had a bunch of boats. It took 13.24 pounds for 3 bass. Second, third, fourth, fifth, it was a shootout. It was like 10.84. Tad Johnson, last year's reigning champion. Tad fished with Miles Olson, if you're watching, young hammer, high school kid. 10.84, and then we had like a 10.69, 10.64, 10.60. I'm not making this up. That was second, third, fourth, fifth. And any one of those fish could have ate one more minnow and jumped up 2 or 3 spots in placement. So that's how it is. How do we catch those fish? How do we catch our fish this week? How are things going? Yesterday we got some wicked weather. We had to postpone a guide trip. We were 30 minutes onto the water. We had a cell come through when I launched the boat to the north. Didn't hit us. Saw some lightning. Stalled out. It definitely pushed through. We got out there, started fishing. Another band popped up out of nowhere pretty quick overnight, and then kind of really assembled into a stronger shower and thunderstorms and lightning and all kinds of stuff. Not the type of thing to play around with. I had 2 adults, 2 younger kids in the boat. I'm not going to mess around. I treat these situations just like if they were my kids in the boat. And once things started to get weird and we saw this band come through, I grabbed my phone, looked at what we're looking at, and we got off. Luckily, we did do that because piles of rain, lightning, all that fun stuff came through. All right, enough of that. How are we catching our fish? So we're catching our fish a variety of ways. It's a weird season. Water temps are still in the mid-70s. People are swimming. It looks like summer out there in terms of lake life. There's not a single dock being pulled yet. Everything looks like end of July, August. It's crazy. The fish, though, are starting to make some movements. And I've always been a believer that the fish don't know what time of year it is. They just know what the water temperature is. But I'm starting to rethink that just a hair. And I say that because I'm seeing some fish movements that should be happening when the water gets colder. So maybe there's something about that. Chime in, give me some feedback. Maybe there's something about where these fish just go, okay, I've been here long enough. Time to move someplace else. I don't know, but we are seeing that shallow push even without these water temps really dropping. So we're going to see some cooler weather this week for sure. We're going to see that shallower push really happen. But right now, just like we talked about last week, I'm continuing to see our fish stalling out in that 5 to 12 foot range. So we're flipping at them. We're throwing big jigs. You can get in the outside weed line. You can throw a Ned rig. You can throw a jig worm. You can throw a drop shot. We've talked about that too. And the mosquitoes are all over in my garage. You can throw those things, but they seem to be smaller fish. Our bigger fish are coming on bigger jigs, flipping into the heavier cover. That seems to be what we're getting fish on. So we're using 30 to 65 pound braid. We're using, you can do a fluorocarbon leader, a 17 or 20 pound leader if you want. If you're flipping into heavy, gnarly stuff, dirty, tantic, stained water, wouldn't even mess with the leader. We're using heavy action rods. We're using strong, powerful reels with good drag systems, and we're flipping to the heavy stuff. We want to plummet and punch right through to where those fish are. So you want a heavy jig. I'm using no less than a 1/2 ounce. I'm actually using a 3/4 ounce jig myself. This is a 1/2 ounce all-terrain Rattle and AT jig. This is where I would start at a minimum, but like I said, with me the last few days, I'm going right to the 3/4 ounce, and I'm fishing that, throwing it up, plunk, letting it punch through that heavy cover, go to the bottom, give it a couple shakes, maybe swim it back a little bit, give it a couple shakes, and I reel up and I flip again. If there's a fish in the area and it wants to eat that bait, it's going to eat that bait. So that's been our big bite. That's been our big fish bite, is flipping that heavy cover. Now, there's a lot of fish on the rocks right now. And the rock bite is very, very timing driven, as we've found out the last few days. They want to bite at a specific time, and it's not always right away in the morning. It could be 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. It could be right when the sun comes up. It could be at noon. At some point, those fish on the rocks turn on. We're seeing the fish stacking up on your classic hard bottom spots. But there's definitely a window bite, and I have seen it more often than not this last week. The window bite is not the first couple hours of light like we're used to all summer long. I've seen it happen at 9, I've seen it happen at 10:30 or 1. My advice is, if you see fish on the rocks, if you can see them on your forward-facing sonar, side imaging electronics, whatever it might be, you know there's fish there and they're not biting, sift back through that spot a couple hours later and see. There's a window of bite, and every lake can be different, and I have not fully put my finger on this as to why, but I've talked to enough people to know this is happening. There's a window bite where they just want to eat. They decide at this moment, this time, this juncture, this hour, whatever it is, they want to eat. So the rock bite definitely is holding fish, and it's holding big fish, but it's a window bite. I think the flipping bite in heavier cover is a more consistent pattern all day long. I also think you can really work a dock line right now and catch a bunch of fish on jigs, on wacky rigs, on a number of things. I think a lot of the fish are pulling up into the docks, and it should be that way for the next month. And as these docks get pulled by landowners, that's when I love going down those same shorelines, throwing chatterbaits, swim jigs, spinner baits, moving baits, covering water. All these docks that get put in the water create structure that we don't realize exists. And when the docks are pulled, you have sand spots and hard spots and weed turns and all this stuff that the docks create, from shade, from cover, from people, from things, from weed rollers. It doesn't matter. There's all these variations of structure along the shoreline when these dock lines get pulled, and you can burn right through them. So I'm excited for that bite to come. We'll talk about that later. So getting back to the jig. So this is a 1/2 ounce rattling ET jig. Like I said, this is where you can start if you want to. I would go to a 3/4 ounce myself, but you can definitely fish a 1/2 ounce if you can get away with it. And I'm just tipping it with a pocket craw. I really like the pocket craw for a number of reasons. It can give you a little bigger profile, but it can be a slender profile. It allows me to fish quicker. Those flapper tails just kind of pendulum around. They entice some fish. There's so many things you can put in the back end of a jig. I like to fish the pocket craw. And this magic craw swirl color, don't know how well it will show up on video, but it is just awesome. It looks kind of like a green pumpkin, watermelon, kind of translucent, but I don't know, on certain light conditions, I don't know if you can see it here, it almost gives like a iridescent hue, a laminate iridescent hue, which in my mind shows what a bluegill gives off, what a baitfish gives off in the water. So I like this color on the back end of this green pumpkin, darker variation jig. I think it just looks great. So you can certainly put this thing on whole, right? And that's about where it's going to line up. It's a longer tail. Or what I've been doing lately is I take about a 1/2 inch off. 1/2 inch, a little shorter crawback, and then I throw it on there. And you've probably seen me do this before in a video. It's one of my common ways to fish a jig is I take that 1/2 inch off, throw it on there, nice and neat, nice and straight, tuck it in over that, behind that rattle, front of that rattle, I mean, and there you go. Now there's your little morsel. That guy right there, that thing is, oof, that thing looks good. That thing looks really good. And then you take your proprietary weed lock, which is this rubber piece. It goes right over the hook. That actually snugs on there nice and neat. I missed the hook. There we go. Snugs on there nice and neat and actually holds that plastic on there nice. So that's what I'm flipping around. This imitates all kinds of things. It's got that hue we talked about, so it may look like a bluegill darting down, a perch, crayfish. It looks like something these fish want to eat. That's what's getting bit the most right now. That is a very good looking jig. I might even tie this one on a rod and fish this tomorrow, but looks very good. So that's kind of how we're catching our fish. We are throwing some minnow baits, throwing those around, scoping some fish, strolling some fish. That still works. There's still fish roaming around. The walleyes are starting to do some things. I'm not sure yet. Haven't caught on them quite well. I think the water temps are driving that bite. I think with this cooler weather coming in this week, I'm going to focus on walleye fishing more next week. I promise. I know I've gotten a lot of questions and comments about that. I'm going to switch gears into more of a hybrid walleye bass scenario. So hopefully when I report back next Sunday, forewarning, could be interesting. I have a double, I have a morning trip and an evening trip until after dark. So I will get after you at some point with the report. It might be late on Sunday night. I am not sure. We'll figure it out. Maybe I'll try to knock one out on Saturday and post it on Sunday. Either way, there'll be a report coming next week, I promise. So that's what's working. That's what's happening. Pike are chowing everything. Haven't targeted any panfish, sorry. I'm seeing muskies everywhere. If you're a muskie angler, it seems like they're moving. I know on Waconee on Friday, just our little bass derby for all terrain, we had like encounters with like 7 muskies and like 4 hookups. Not our boat. We had 1 follow around our boat, but we had, of the boats, we had like 7 reports of muskie sightings and like 4 teams hooked one. I think 1 team even landed one. Seems like they're going all over. We're seeing that on Tonka, Forest Lake. I'm hearing that same. Whitebeard, Bald Eagle, I'm hearing good reports of muskies moving around. So it seems like the muskies are coming back into the swing of things. I know we're cooling down. Muskie guys and gals like to see that. Changes the water temps, all that good stuff. So that's what I'm seeing. Get out there, chase some fish. Get the sweatpants, get the sweatshirt. It's going to feel good this next week. It should be a great week to go chase them down. The last week of September is ahead of us. And then we're going to be looking October in the face. So still plenty of fishing ahead. Plenty of great fishing ahead. Get out there, have some fun, be safe. Set some hooks for me.